to the 4 in Coronation Street, where it is.
You are invited to a murder. A stranger lies dead in Arlington Grange. There are 6 suspects, but which one is the killer? Could it be Mrs. Peacock, lady of the manor and beautiful society hostess? Perhaps Colonel Mustard, military hero and intimate family friend? Is Reverend Green a saint or sinner? Is it Professor Plum, a man with a degree of suspicion? Miss Scarlet, Mrs. Peacock's glamorous stepdaughter? Or Mrs. White, loyal housekeeper and devoted confidant? And here is your host for Cluedo, Richard Madeley.
Thank you. Good evening, hello, and welcome to Cluedo, the detective game where we invite you to examine the evidence, collect the clues, and solve the mystery of a murder at Arlington Grange. And hoping to do all of that here in the studio are celebrity detectives, Countdown's mathematical genius, Carol Vorderman, and MP and Liberal Democrat spokesman, Charles Kennedy. And challenging them, we have from TVAM and Holiday 92, Kathy Taylor, and newscaster and presenter, Richard Bath. Good luck and good hunting to you all. Well, Cluedo, of course, is a game of observation, elimination and deduction. Our studio sleuths, and of course you at home, have to work out who committed the murder, with which weapon, and in which room. And you should follow all the evidence very carefully, because you could win a fantastic murder mystery weekend in our special Cluedo competition. I'll give you the details on that later on. But first of all, we have to conduct a murder inquiry. And I'll begin by revealing some important initial clues. We do know that the murder was committed with one of these 6 weapons. Was it the spear, the shotgun, the cake knife, the parasol, the corkscrew, or was it the paperweight? I can also reveal that the victim was killed in one of these 6 rooms. Was it the dining room, the drawing room, the billiard room, the library, the kitchen, or was it the study? Well, let's now examine the crucial evidence, the events that lead up to the murder. We're about to witness a family reunion, which brings some unpleasant surprises.
Mrs. White.
Professor, the floor would be
wet. With cleaning this. Oh, is that our visitor? Look.
Not exactly. Sister Concepta, conceptual sister of the poor and needy, and sister-in-law of dear Mrs. P.
It appears Jack had a sister.
Lost in the mist of time and the tributaries of the Amazon, until a chance letter showed me the light. Could you find a safe place for this, my dear? I don't feel easy carrying £500,000 worth of emeralds about.
Oh, £500,000! That settles it. I'm ready to be converted. Reverend Green.
Man of the cloth carrying a gun. It's disgusting.
Mrs. White, could you please take these things and put them in the library, in the safe?
Oh, yes, it's perfect. I can see the potential instantly.
A glass of sherry, Sister Concepta?
Oh, no, thank you. I never drink alcohol. The devil's stuff.
Then I must have sold my soul long ago.
I believe you have. I've read all about those animal experiments. You scientists believe you are God. But the good Lord said, cast out false gods. And I intend to do his bidding. Frankenstein.
That's a mite unchristian for a nun, isn't it?
Ah, Colonel Mustard, ex-SAS. Not exactly renowned for Christian values, I hear.
What exactly do you mean by that?
You'll find out soon enough. All of you will come to see the error of your ways. The church has a clear view of morality. And I intend to clean up my own doorstep.
Look here, this is my parish, and I take care of my parishioners' spiritual well-being.
Do you indeed, Reverend?
This is my stepdaughter.
Hi, I'm Vivian. Nice to meet you.
Young lady, this kind of attire will not be welcome around here in the future.
Well, if you don't mind me saying so, it really isn't your house to decide.
Actually, it is.
Oh, what did you say?
Last will and testament of Jack Peacock. On his death, this house goes to his surviving sister, me. I lost touch with him when we were children. I might never have heard of Arlington Grange if it hadn't been for an innocent letter.
And who wrote to you?
So you see, Mrs. Peacock, this property is mine. And in your safe there's £500,000 worth of jewels. Everything I need to turn this place into a God-fearing convent.
If I find out who started this.
What have I done? I presume this belongs to the African Queen.
Oh, I suppose I'll put it with the baggage.
I'll deal with it.
I'm sorry, Mrs. White. This damn woman's got me all on edge.
Oh, you're not the only one. I've never known none be so sinister.
Yes, there's not room for two banks in this high street. This is spiritual warfare.
I'll have to do something.
Here, hold this end. This room will make the perfect prayer retreat.
Sister, when I read that local history book and found out that you were still alive, I thought it would be a nice surprise for Mrs. Peacock. I had no idea that... Please, couldn't you reconsider?
Oh, it's out of the question. But you will be rewarded, my dear, by knowing you have given this house a spiritual rebirth.
But Mrs. Peacock's done everything for Arlington Grange, and when she goes, it belongs to Miss Scarlett.
Thank you, Mrs. White, but I can speak for myself. Now, if you wouldn't mind leaving us alone, please. You know, I won't be deprived of my inheritance.
My dear, you have no claim on this house, and I intend to have you evicted. Where'd that woman go with my luggage? Ah, Carol. Meditating on your murderous past, are you?
What exactly are you driving at?
You trained mercenaries in the upper Amazon, did you not? They attacked and wiped out an entire missionary settlement. All the natives were killed. That was my settlement, Colonel.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Maybe you didn't give the order yourself. But those mercenaries were your soldiers, Colonel. I hold you responsible. You will pay. Where's that woman gone?
All that I own, all that I've built up, taken away from me by this penguin.
Elizabeth, calm down.
Oh, no, I won't calm down. Where is she now?
She mislaid her luggage.
Oh, really? Well, I'll find her luggage for her.
I know who did this.
Oh, good afternoon, Mrs. White. Have you seen the Reverend?
He rushed out, seemed quite upset.
Thank you. Who made all that mess?
No respect, some people. Wax everywhere.
Yes. Oh, I see somebody's had a go at that crabby old nun. More power to them, I say.
I think we'd better call the police. Sister Concepta. Someone's killed her.
Well, they say old habits die hard, but somebody killed Sister Concepta. Only 2 people know who murdered her. I'm one of them, and the other, of course, is the killer, who was one of these 6 suspects. Did Colonel Mustard's dark deeds provide a motive for murder? Mrs. Peacock stood to lose her home, so did Concepta have to lose her life? Did Miss Scarlett ensure her inheritance with a policy of murder? Did Mrs. White send the sister on a final, fatal journey? To remove a rival, did Reverend Green break the sixth commandment? Or was none minus one the sinister solution for Professor Plum? So there they are, our 6 suspects. 6 possible murder weapons and 6 possible rooms. So, studio detectives, based on the information you've seen so far, I want a gut reaction. Who do you think's guilty?
Well, our gut reaction, I think, is it was the library.
Mm-hmm.
The spear.
And Mrs. White.
Mrs. White? No. Ridiculous. Doesn't seem to be a very popular choice here. Let's move across to Kathy and Richard.
Well, our feeling is that it was done in the billiard room next to the library.
Yeah.
It was the cake knife, and it was the Reverend Green.
The Reverend Green? Ah, 1 or 2 yeses there. Still, not much agreement from our panel here, but don't worry, because we're going to look at much more evidence as we go and move into cross-examination, because this is round 1, and this is where our studio sleuths can cross-examine all the suspects. But before they begin, one more vital piece of information. Only the murderer can lie. All the others are telling the truth all the time. I wonder if they can tell which is which. Anyway, Carol and Charles, would you like to start the cross-examination, please?
Yes, well, seeing as we first suspected Mrs. White, I'd like to ask Mrs. White the first question. When Colonel Mustard announced the murder in the hall, and you were on your hands and knees, brushing away at the rug, I believe, do you know how and why the wax had been spilt on the rug?
Well, I have my suspicions. Let's put it this way, it was a big footprint. And you'd think a man with that much education could read a notice as simple as wet floor. You'd think that, wouldn't you?
Mrs. White, you make it sound like that was the biggest crime of the day. Thank you. Another question, please.
Yes, Mrs. Peacock, I'd like to throw this question at you, if I may. You were obviously very angry in the study. You were talking to Colonel Mustard there, really sounding off. In fact, you thumped the paperweight on the desk and said that you would go and sort out this nun. Now, we would like to know where you went and what you did.
Well, before Colonel Mustard came into the study, I had called my lawyer, who had informed me that indeed this will was completely valid and that there was nothing that I could do about it. And yes, I was very perplexed. I mean, this is my house. As I said, it's my world. It's everything I've built up. And I was very perplexed, and so I decided I would take it up with the woman myself. And I went upstairs to look for her. But I never actually found her, because the next thing I heard was Colonel Mustard when he said that this awful tragedy had happened in our house.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Another question.
Now, Miss Scarlett, the last time we saw you, it was in the billiard room, and you had the parasol with you.
Yes.
And Sister Concepta, of course, had just threatened you with eviction. So it was
Ghastly
quite a bad occasion. What did you do next, and what did you do with the parasol?
I think I just chucked that parasol amongst the rest of her junk, and then I went upstairs and I made quite a few calls.
Now, can you tell us who those calls were to, please, Miss Scarlett?
Some friends, and one was to my bank manager, because he'd actually forwarded me a loan on my inheritance. It's rather sort of embarrassing.
I see, how unfortunate. All right, another question, please, from Kathy and Richard.
Well, I want to address a question to the Reverend Green, a shifty character, if ever I've seen one. We last saw you in the kitchen with a shotgun looking very menacing. You'd already been accused by Sister Concepta of being ungodly. Where did you go between leaving the kitchen and departing through the front door?
Well, quite frankly, I'd had enough of this nun, and I was quite furious, in fact, very furious. And I went inside of my car, get myself together, and I went round to the front of the house, and I removed every single piece of luggage I could find of hers and left it there in the garden. I'm sorry, I did. It was.
Well, I never.
Right, another question, please, from Charles and Carol.
This time we'd like to address Colonel Mustard, if that's possible. When Mrs. Peacock left the study in a rage, what did you do?
Well, I stayed in the study. I wanted to glance at the will to make sure Elizabeth was correct. And she was. So then I went through the house looking for her to make sure she didn't get up to any mischief. And that's when I found the body.
All right, Kathy, you've got a question, haven't you?
Yes, I have, to Professor Plum, if I may. Now, we saw you going into the hall looking for the Reverend Green. You asked Mrs. White where he was. And we would like to know why you were so interested in his whereabouts, and had it got anything to do with those emeralds?
No, not at all. Reverend Green and I are very close friends, and he's very knowledgeable about roses, and I'm a bit of an amateur. And I was simply looking for him to ask him his advice about a particular rose bush. That's all.
I see, very innocuous.
Yes.
All right, thank you. We've heard now from all of our 6 suspects, and now our studio detectives have to make a deduction. Now, the best thing, of course, would be a completely correct one. But an entirely incorrect deduction would be almost as valuable, because they will then be able to eliminate a room, a weapon, and a suspect from our inquiries. So, Carol, Charles, can we have your deduction, please?
Yes, our deduction is that the foul murder was committed in the library with the cake knife.
Yeah.
By the Reverend Green.
You think the vicar did it? Just, well, it's not a popular accusation. Why do you think that?
Well, we think that the Reverend Green had a motive, but the motive was probably theft, but he was discovered when he was actually carrying out the theft, and they need to move on to murder.
All right, Kathy and Richard, let's have your deduction.
Well, we've actually moved from the billiard room to the library. We think it was committed in the library.
We've also changed our minds about the weapon and the committer of the murder. We're going for the parasol as the weapon.
Okay.
And that means it has to have been Miss Scarlett.
Miss
Overdraft?
Well, let's just ask you why you think it is that. Is it purely because of that?
Exactly it. I mean, she revealed a very clear financial motive. She's in financial trouble. There was a £500,000 worth of emeralds in the safe.
Yes. All right, let's just go back to Carol and Charles. Go through your deductions. You say it was in the library, it was the cake knife, and it was the Reverend Green.
Definitely.
Well, I can tell you at this stage you've got none of those deductions correctly made. And let's move across to Kathy and Richard. You also said the library, well, we know that wasn't it now, the parasol and Mr. Scarlett, and I can tell you that you've got none out of 3 as well. Both completely wrong. All right, let's just take stock here. We can now definitely eliminate the following: the library, the cake knife and the parasol, and, of course, the Reverend Green and Miss Scarlett. You are completely cleared of suspicion, but I would be very grateful if you'd stay here, please, because you may be material witnesses, you may have seen something, you may know something that's relevant to the crime. And there we have to leave our investigation for just a couple of minutes, but we will be back with more evidence concerning the murder of Sister Concepta. So join us again after the break. Welcome back to Part 2. Sister Concepta is dead. But who killed her? With which weapon and in which room at Arlington Grange? Well, that's what we're trying to find out here. And so far, we've discovered this. We've definitely eliminated the library, the cake knife, and the parasol, and the Reverend Green and Miss Scarlett are no longer under suspicion. So we still have 5 possible rooms, 4 possible weapons, and just 4 possible suspects. In a moment, our studio detectives will continue to question those suspects and the 2 witnesses. But first of all, we have to examine some very important new evidence that's come in. We begin in the library, where Mrs. White is putting the jewels in the safe.
£500,000. I wonder who the old witch knocked over the head to get that.
What's she mean about the potential of the house?
Bad news, whatever it means. Mark you. This woman is trouble.
Get to you.
You're right. At least I got out of my system.
Calm down. Why don't you take a nice long walk?
Absolutely. It's a battle of wits, and I've got to get mine about me.
Well, I have to say that if we didn't know that the Reverend Green was completely innocent, that would have looked rather black for you, Vicar.
It certainly would.
But we know that you were telling the truth and you are innocent. So our studio sleuths will now put this fresh evidence to good use. In round 2, they can cross-examine any suspect or witness that they want to, and each question and answer must then be followed immediately by a deduction. So we'll start with Carol and Charles.
Well, let's go back to Colonel Mustard. You were having a drink earlier in the proceedings in the dining room. Now, after Mrs. Peacock had her conversation with you, where she stormed out of the study, did you go back to the dining room and have another drink?
Yes, I did go back to the dining room. It's rather fine wine, and I took it with me when I was in search of Elizabeth.
Ah.
Would you like to make a deduction from that?
We think that, therefore, it was the dining room, the corkscrew, and it was the devilish Colonel Mustard.
You are thinking it's Colonel Mustard. Now, and so does the gallery. All right, you've said the dining room, the corkscrew, and Colonel Mustard. You've done a good elimination because none out of 3 again. None out of 3. All right, let's take stock of the situation now. In addition to those eliminations we made in round 1, we've also now eliminated from our inquiries the dining room, the corkscrew, and of course, Colonel Mustard. But we still have 4 possible rooms, 3 possible murder weapons, and 3 remaining suspects. All right, Kathy and Richard, let's have a question from you.
Okay, to Professor Plum. Now, you were accused, in not so many words, as having left a large footprint of wax on Mrs. White's lovely clean rug in the hallway. Do you admit to that? Was it your footprint?
No, I hotly dispute that because I'm a compulsive wiper of feet. In fact, my shoes only last about 6 weeks. And I remember it was because I kept wiping my feet that my first wife left me. She said, "I'm jealous of that mat. I wish you'd give me the same attention that you'd give the doormat."
So, in a word, no.
No.
Right, Kathy, Richard, let's have the deduction.
We think it was Mrs. Peacock. She had the strongest motive. And the crime was committed in the drawing room with the spear.
Uh-huh.
Ludicrous.
Ludicrous or not, let's remind ourselves. Kathy and Richard think the murder was committed in the drawing room with the spear and by Mrs. Peacock. Well, I can tell you that 2 out of those 3 deductions are correct. Well done. You're getting very close.
Getting there.
All right, you two, would you like to ask a question?
We would like to ask Mrs. White a question. It was you who started to bring the bedlam into Arlington Grange by writing the supposedly innocent letter to Sister Concepta. Did you realise that she would inherit Arlington Grange?
Of course not. I would never have caused that trouble if I'd known about that will, and I wish you hadn't mentioned that because nobody else knew I wrote that letter until now.
Could we please have a deduction based on that?
Yes, I can imagine that Mrs. White is a bit distressed that that's come to light.
Yes.
That may well be the opening we've been looking for. I think on the basis of this, we deduce that it is in the drawing room, that it did involve the spear, and that it was committed by Mrs. White.
I can tell you, it was the drawing room, and it was the spear, and it was Mrs. White.
Yes, I did it. I was just trying to help Mrs. Peacock and the house. I started it all with that letter, so I felt I had to stop it. All those emeralds seemed to be the answer. I knew Sister Concepta needed them to build her convent. So I thought, if I got rid of them, maybe she'd go away. I stole them, and I hid them in the drawing room. I thought no one would look in there with a wet floor. But when I went to check that they were safe, she caught me red-handed. She threatened me with that spear thing. Well, I fought back. I couldn't help myself. I tried to cover my tracks as best I could. I forgot about the damn wet wax on the drawing room floor.
So, it was Mrs. White who murdered Sister Concepta in the drawing room, and she used the spear to kill her. My apologies to the other 5. You're all, of course, cleared of suspicion and free to go. And, of course, our congratulations have to go to Carol and Charles. Well done. You did a very good piece of detection, and it was a difficult one tonight. And to Kathy and Richard, commiserations. You did well, too, but not quite well enough. Round of applause, please. Yes, well done indeed. And I hope you've enjoyed playing detective at home tonight. In just a few moments, I'll be giving you the phone number for our competition with a chance to win a murder mystery weekend for 2. We'll be back next week to solve another murder at Arlington Grange. But for now, from all of us here on Cluedo, it's a very good night to you. Good night. To enter our special competition, phone 0891 606 707. The lines are open until midnight Tuesday. Just answer a simple question based on tonight's programme, and you could win a murder mystery weekend for 2.
The answer to last week's competition was B. The last place everyone else saw the contracts was in the dining room. And last week's winner was Mr. Philip Hurst from Southport.